everybody, I'm Stacy.
And I'm her daughter, Mickey.
And welcome to KiddieNomics! Welcome everybody to another fun-filled Friday edition of Kids Financial Literacy with KiddieNomics. We are super excited to have you guys all here today. I know all the kids are already saying hi in the chat box. So we have a really, really special guest expert today, Miss Alistien Simon. She's going to talk to us all about business incorporation. So we're going to get into that in a second, but before we do, let me share my screen as usual. One second. Okay, let's get to the beginning. Okay, there we go. There's KiddieNomics. Hi, everybody. So first off, let me welcome all of the new kiddies that have joined us today. We had a whole bunch of new signups this week, which is fantastic. So we want to welcome all of the new kids that if this is your first time on KiddieNomics, no worries. You just say that it's my first time in the chat box and all the kids will welcome you, okay? And of course, let's welcome back all of our returning kiddies that are here week after week. We love you for being here, right? We love you guys for every week you join with us on KiddieNomics and keep our KiddieNomics community so fun and happy and healthy. We are so happy for you guys. So let's talk about what is KiddieNomics, right?
Yeah.
What's KiddieNomics? So KiddieNomics is here to help kids ages 8 to 13 to develop a healthy relationship towards financial literacy, helping to start kids off on the right path to have a successful financial future. That's what we want for you. That's what I want for you. That's what you want for me. That's what we want for every kid out there. Because guess what? With financial literacy, the sky's the limit. Beyond the sky. Now we're going to Mars, right? So there's no limit with financial literacy, which is absolutely amazing. So let me do some housekeeping items before we get into roll call. All right. So just remember, everybody, that KiddieNomics is recorded. So every KiddieNomics webinar is recorded, and then I do upload the recorded videos onto our KiddieNomics YouTube channel. So you will be able to watch it back in case you've missed anything or you joined late or it doesn't matter. You can always watch back this KiddieNomics webinar and all of our other KiddieNomics webinars. They're all on our KiddieNomics YouTube channel. So please keep in mind that every single one of our KiddieNomics webinars, each one is its own edition. So if this is your first time, don't worry, you won't feel behind because this one is strictly about business incorporation. And then if you want to get caught up per se, you can go back to our KiddieNomics YouTube channel and you can check out, if this is your first time, check out assets and liabilities, the savings one, and budgeting for kids on our KiddieNomics YouTube channel. And then of course we have a slew of other videos that you can go back and watch also, okay? So we like to maintain a very healthy environment here on KiddieNomics, and maintaining your privacy is really important to us. So please remember that in the chat box, because we cannot see or hear any of you kids, right, to maintain your privacy. So your only way to communicate with us is through the chat box. You can ask and answer questions in the chat box. The only thing I ask is make sure, just don't do any spamming because I monitor the chat box to see what questions you're asking, okay? Also, in the chat box, we never want to see. What don't we ever want to see?
Phone numbers, email addresses,
ages, just your regular address. We don't want to see anything personal about you, right?
Yeah.
So never put anything really personal in the chat box because we want to make sure that we help to keep you safe in the KiddieNomics community, okay?
Yeah.
All right, let's do
roll call.
Roll call. Let me see. All right. In the chat box, tell me which country you are joining us from today. Let me see. Let me go back. Micah, England. Jenna, Canada. Madeline, Canada. T. Brooks, which is Akira, right? Akira, Canada. Stacy Ann, Canada. Oh no, Danielle, you can't hear anything. try to log out and then log back in. That should fix your issue, okay? All right. Linda, Canada. Gabriella. Hi, Gabs, Canada. Anne, Canada. Lai and Adera, Canada, and Canada, somewhere in the world from Logan. Hashtag, I think, Canada. Oh, Adonis, you're from Candyland today. That was one of my favorite games growing up. I love that game.
Like Candy Crush, or you're addicted to
I
it?
know, I love Candy Crush too. I love that game too. All right, good stuff, Logan. Canada. Martine is Canada. Canada. Dabland. Ooh, I like that, Ibby. That's awesome. I like that one. Layla is Canada. And I watched you guys on the Marilyn Dennis show. Oh, that's so awesome. Thanks, Jenna. So yeah, so we did appear on the Marilyn Dennis show. And that aired yesterday. So that was super fun. And thank you to everybody that participated in this segment. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. We just wanted to share our KiddieNomics community with the rest of the world, right? And that was fun. Did you like it? Yeah, it was fun. So if you guys have missed it, you can check out our social media channels on Instagram or our Facebook channel, or did I post on Twitter? LinkedIn. You can see the video. I posted it there, okay? Okay. Daniela, you still have no audio. Did you try to log out and log back in? Try that, okay? What was that? I did not hear you. Layla, are you having the same issue? Turn up your volume. Huh. Yeah, my volume's up. Alistien, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Yeah, okay. Can everybody else hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, let's not be silly. I can hear you clearly. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. I want to make sure Tulu says yes. All right, good. All right, for everybody that cannot hear me, please just log out and log back in, okay?
But how are you supposed to hear you if you can't hear you?
Oh, I'll type it in the chat box. That's true. I'll type it in the chat box to log out and log back in. All right. So let's get into our special guest for today.
You forgot about me.
Oh, sorry. Which country are you from today?
Let's see. I'm from Classroom A1.
Classroom A1. I'm sure that's from anime.
It's from My Hero Academia.
My Hero Academia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know anything about this anime world, so sorry, but she loves anime. That is her stuff, anime. All right, so today we have on Miss Alistien Simon. That is so awesome. We welcome her back to KiddieNomics. She was on KiddieNomics on a special edition of KiddieNomics because that was the day that we celebrated Mickey's birthday. And we dressed up for Halloween. So that was super fun. You guys can always go back and watch that one back. That was the October 30th, 2020 edition. And Miss Alistien had talked about sole proprietorship. So if you are starting your own business and your kids are solo, we talked about opening up, creating a sole proprietorship. So now we're going to go up a level and we're going to talk about business incorporation. So how to incorporate your business. So this is a really important one, okay? So let's talk about Miss Alistien. Miss Alistien is a certified law clerk specializing in corporate services under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, Canada Business Corporations Act, and Limited Partnership Act and Business Act. So that means she's really knowledgeable about what we're going to talk about today, which is going to be super fun. So let's give, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let's give a big KiddieNomics round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Alistien, thank you for coming back on KiddieNomics and sharing your knowledge. This one is going to be awesome because business incorporation is a very, very big topic that we need to know about. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you and Mickey. How are you guys doing today?
We're good. Right?
Yes.
Friday.
Oh,
It's KiddieNomics Friday,
And
so
I
we're
got
always
my
happy.
cheesy bread.
And she wanted to.
Okay, so I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so today, as Miss Stacy told you, I'm here to talk about incorporation. Okay, now, how many of you heard of incorporation before?
Not me.
Everybody?
Nikki says she hasn't heard of it. Timmy says no, not me. Madeline
Okay.
says no, but Adonis says I have. And
Oh,
no. Gabby says no. Rain, love your name, Rain. No. Micah says no. So I think most of the kids, this is going to be
Say-
brand new, which is awesome.
okay, which is great. Okay, so incorporation is another very important type of business. As you mentioned, we spoke about the sole proprietorship before, and this is another level. So today we're going to be talking about the private non-offering corporations in Ontario, which is governed by the Ontario Business Corporations Act. Because as you know, if you go to different provinces, they have different rules and regulations. So today we're just going to focus in Ontario on private. And when I say non-offering corporation, it means that the shares are not offered to the public. It's like it's a private company and non-offering shares. So it's just basically who you decide if you want to give your children or someone that you know privately that want to come in and be a shareholder. An offering corporation, just to tell you the difference, is like a public company that's offering shares to the public. Like you guys know Nike and who have shares in that gaming thing that was a big thing the other day, and all
You're
those.
talking about Roblox. When Roblox
Yes.
went-
So those are public companies that offer shares to the public. So we're just going to talk about the private non-offering corporations. Give me an example like KiddieNomics, right? You're a private non-offering corporation. You only offer shares to intimate people that you know and you invite to be shareholders, right? So corporation starts from a sole or one person, right? Owner, director, and officer to many directors, officers, or shareholders. Okay. Let's talk about the nature and the characteristics of a corporation. So
sorry. Akira says that she doesn't understand. So can you go back to the topic? So we're going to talk about the non-offering.
I know. Let's try and break it down.
Yes.
We're going to talk about today is what we call private corporations, which are non-offering corporations, meaning we're not going to invite shareholders to the public. We're not going to offer our shares to the public. It's just for private use. Okay.
Can we explain what a share is so that they understand?
Yeah, okay. That I was going to go into that.
Oh, a little bit later?
Yeah, but a share is a shareholder is someone who owns shares. It's just to say that you own part of the company, and that's you get a share. You could have 100 shares, you could have 10 shares, and that makes you an owner in the company.
Perfect.
Mickey, do you understand, Mickey?
Yeah.
Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to get into it a little bit more detailed as we go along. Okay? Now, because it's very intricate. There are lots of different steps in a corporation and forming a corporation, but don't feel too overwhelmed, because when you're older and you decide to have your own corporation, there's going to be a lot of people to help you along the way. So today we're just going to talk about the basic things and what a corporation is, okay? So the characteristics and the nature, how a corporation is made, what makes a corporation. And one of the things is that it's a legal entity. It's separate from its owners or shareholders. Okay? If you remember in the sole proprietorship series, we touched on that a sole proprietor and the business is one. But with a corporation, the business is separate from the owner. Okay? Now, the corporation may own property, carry on business, and have debts or liabilities in its own name. So the corporation, like we say, it's separate. It has its own assets, its own property. So you might have a building and it's in the name of the business. The business will have, the corporation will have its own debts, people that the corporation owes money to, its own liabilities, and its own assets. All the desk and the furniture and all that belongs to the business, not to the owners. Okay? The share, yeah.
And that, sorry, Miss Alistien, did everybody understand that? Can you let me know in the chat box?
Yeah.
What
I
is the
understand.
characteristics of a corporation? Yep, Gabby says yes.
Yeah.
Rain says yes. Layla says no.
Okay.
You have
Akira says no.
a company and another
Daniela,
company.
hold on. Daniela says yes. Adonis says yes. Anne says sort of. Logan says no. So, so if we say a corporation, could we
Mhm.
characterize it as its own person?
Yes. As its own individual, yeah, its own person, its own, it's separate from you as the owner. So I could have, in Kittynomics, let's use Kittynomics as an example, okay? Kittynomics was created and made by Miss Stacy. Miss Stacy is the sole owner, the only director, and the only officer. Am I right, Miss Stacy?
Yes.
Right. Now, Kittynomics is actually its own person, its own identity. It is separate from Miss Stacy. So Kittynomics have its own assets, right? Its own liability, like the name Kittynomics belong to Kittynomics. It doesn't belong to Miss Stacy, right? If Miss Stacy goes out and register the kids and they have a program that Kittynomics owns, it's not Miss Stacy's, it's Kittynomics that owns it. And if Kittynomics have to pay for certain items, say Kittynomics bought computers or a program, and it owes money to someone for these programs, it is not Miss Stacy's responsibility. It's Kittynomics that owns all of that. So even though Miss Stacy is the owner, the director, and the officer in Kittynomics, herself, her house and her banking information and her personal assets does not blend together with Kittynomics. It's separate. It's a separate legal entity. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Right. So I think that the kids understand now.
I get it now.
You get it? Okay. And the shareholders, so the shareholders own shares in the corporation, but they, like I just explained, they do not own the business. They do not own the assets or debts and liabilities of the business. Okay?
That's right.
A corporation must be created before it comes into existence. So it always starts with a thought, an idea, right? That that you might have about a business. So you have this idea in your head, and this means that in order for it to become a business, you have to do a process where you have to go to the government and file your articles of incorporation, and then you'll be given a certificate of incorporation. So this certificate tells you, okay, you have the right now to have this business incorporated. Okay? So the Articles of Incorporation is a document filed with the government authority that once the proper and required steps are followed, it gives the business the right of incorporation. Okay? Are there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
No.
No? Did everybody
No?
understand that?
Yeah.
Mickey says yes, but everybody else online, let me know. So we can try. Give me a yes or no. Why are you guys so quiet today?
They're
What's
quiet.
going on?
They're probably, it's a lot to take in. It's a
It
lot,
is.
I know.
know
It
this
is.
is a very, very challenging topic. So
It is. And I'm going to try and break it down as much as I can, because I understand that it might seem a little difficult, but it really isn't. Just think about it. And if you have any questions, just know that you can ask your questions, right?
well, I like Jenna's question. She says, so are we the shareholders of Kittynomics?
Well, do you have shares in Kittynomics?
No, unfortunately
No.
not, Jenna. I haven't given out any shares
No shares yet.
in
Remember,
Kittynomics.
when you think of shares, you think of ownership that you have. It's like stocks, like another name for shares. You can say stocks in the company. You bought some shares, so you're owners. At this time, you're not. You're just participating in the program that Kittynomics is offering, which is amazing. It's an amazing program, right? Maybe one day Miss Stacy might offer some shares to her registrants, to the kids once you're older, right?
They're older.
Right. Also, because a corporation is a separate legal entity from its shareholders, it has perpetual existence.
What does that mean, Miss Alistien?
And so that means that the company will continue to live on even if the shareholders withdraw or unfortunately if they die. So no matter what happens, right, the company will continue. So Kittynomics, for instance, can still be around when Mickey's grandchildren, right, come about. Meaning that if the majority of the shareholders, if the shareholders decide not to do away with the company or to wind it up or whatever, it will still live on no matter what. Okay?
Sounds good.
Everybody understand? Okay.
I get it.
So, like I just mentioned, the corporation will only end when the majority of the shareholders decide to get rid of it, dissolve it, or if something with the courts and the courts say it's not operating as it should, zip, get rid of it, or the government. But once the company does what it needs to do with its everyday activities and it's up to date with its filings and paying people on time and doing the right things, right? In the government's eye, it will never go away. Okay?
Yes. So Akira has a question. She wants to
Yeah.
clarify. She wants to know, for example, if you have shares in a company that like sells phones or something like that. So for example, like Apple, is this,
Yes.
that's what that's what you're talking about when you're talking about shares, right? Is that your
Yes.
question, Akira? Okay.
Yeah.
Mickey has a question.
Go ahead.
What if all of your shares are died and it's only you?
Okay, so that's a very good question. We're coming on to what happened to your shares if you die. Is that what you're saying?
I guess. So I guess she's saying if
Like what happens if all of your shares die and the owners just left it long. What can we do now? Is the bit
Can shares die, first of all?
Okay, so we're gonna get to that, Mickey.
okay?
Okay, it's gonna come up in a minute. Because your shares will never die. But one of the advantages of having a corporation is you can plan in your estate, in your will, to have your shares upon your death. And I know you're going to live for a very long time, right? God is going to make that happen. That you can will or you can pass your shares down to anyone you want, your children, your grandchildren. So that's one of the advantages of having a corporation, is that you can pass whatever shares or whatever, your shares that you have in your corporation to your family members, to your children, and they can pass.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay. Gabriella wants to know, how old do you have to be to own a share?
Okay.
Anyone of any age holds a share?
No. So usually when you buy shares, there's a long process. You have to fill out all these things that's governed by the financial regulations and the Securities Act and all that stuff. So usually we can have our share, like the parents, we can have shares that are in trust for our children. So we can buy shares for you guys, our kids, but they won't be able to utilize them or become responsible for them until they're a certain age, usually 18, right?
Okay.
Yes.
So
yeah. Because as you go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. So the kids are a little still confused about what exactly a share is and what it does. So maybe if you go on with your presentation, and then we'll get to that part of the presentation. Danielle,
Right.
I see that you raised your hand. Please type your question in the chat box for me, okay? And hopefully you can hear us now. So hopefully that worked too.
Okay. So I just want to say to the kids, remember, when you think of shares, you think of ownership. So you might have one share in a company for one particular class, and that's ownership. So when you think shares, think ownership. Even if it's a little piece of ownership, it is ownership. Okay, you own a little part of the company. So you will be given, you might buy one share or you might buy 1,000,000 shares, right? And depending on how much the company is selling those shares per share. So you might have $1 per share, you might have 10 cents per share, $100 per share, right? And so when you just think about it as this: shares equal ownership. Okay. Okay. So moving on, another thing we must remember is that when you have a lot of shareholders, it is not easy for all the shareholders to manage the business and the affairs of the corporation, right? So the directors are usually given, right, the responsibility for managing or supervising the management of the business and affairs of the corporation. Did I skip something? Let me see here. No. Okay. So I'll go over that quickly. When you have a lot of shareholders, these are people who own the company from having shares, but they just own the part of the company. They're not there to manage the company, help the company to run everyday business-wise. So the shareholders' responsibilities are, one of them is to elect the directors, right? So first you have the shareholder. In order for a business to become something, you have shareholders who start the business and they put money in the business, owning part of the business. Now they will elect the directors who will manage. The directors are responsible for managing or supervising the management of the business, everyday business, the affairs of the corporation. Okay. All right. Mickey says she understands. Everybody else understand?
Akira wants to know, Akira, I'm not sure if your question, are you saying, she says question mark corporation. I'm not sure if you're asking what is a corporation. So if you want to clarify that, but Gabriella says she understands. Brielle says she understands.
Okay.
Everybody else understands what's a corporation. So,
So
that,
yeah.
Yeah.
A corporation, like we said, is another form of business. It's one of the most important form of business. So you have a lot of different businesses out there. You have sole proprietor, and now you have corporation. And a corporation, like I said, it starts with an idea and then you apply to the government for articles of incorporation. And that's when you become a corporation. You have the right to do business as a corporation, but it's just another name for business, another type of business. So today, the type of business that we're looking at is a corporation, which is an incorporate. It is a little thing. It's called incorporation because of the process that you go through to become a corporation. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So everybody understand first why shareholders are not the ones that run the everyday activities of the business, because it'll be too much, right? So they will elect the directors that they think are capable and able to do so, right?
Yes, the kids say yes, they understand.
Okay. So the only functions the shareholders generally perform are the election of the directors and the appointment of auditors. Okay, so they do two things that they are responsible for. So they will elect the directors or they will appoint auditors. Usually, companies prefer not to appoint auditors. They'll just have accountants, right? And if that is the decision that the company wants, to just have accountants, then the shareholders don't need to make that decision. That decision will be made by the directors. Okay?
Yes. Mickey had a question.
Yeah.
Does grocery stores have shares or just companies?
Sorry, Mickey?
Does grocery stores have shares or is it just companies?
I think so we'll have to check. So like Loblaws and I think Sobeys is a public company as well. Not all grocery stores. You have the smaller grocery stores that do not offer shares to the public. Remember what we're talking about today is that we're only focusing on the private companies that are non-offering. So they don't offer shares to the public. But Loblaws is a public company, if that's one example I could use, right? Loblaws is a public company and they offer shares to the public. But you have some grocery stores that you might see, you know, around the corner, the small grocery store, the convenience store that are not public. Okay? You understand? Yeah, go ahead.
We had a question from Jenna. Sorry, Jenna, I missed your question. So I'm just going to scroll back up. Jenna, your question was, what is an entity?
So an entity, it's just, how do I describe it? An entity, it could just be just a corporation or any kind of business, anything that is like its own, has its own little, you know, help me here, Stacey. Have its own, an entity like in a legal form has its own, it's like a little business, or anything that has its own process, its own rules and regulations to be its own little business. So an entity, you could use that word for a business, for any kind of business, right? Is an entity. Okay, I'm gonna see if I. Is there any more? Does she understand?
Yeah, Jenna says, okay, thanks. Perfect. You can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so it's so sorry about that, Jenna, but that stumped me a little bit. So it's just anything that existed, like it have its own existence as a independent business or anything like that, right? It has its own distinct identity. All right. Okay. Okay, so shareholders also in a corporation, when there's not a lot of shareholders, sometimes they might have something called a shareholders agreement. And in that agreement, it can decide what the directors can and cannot do. Okay, so when the shareholders elect the directors, they can put in this agreement. It's called a unanimous shareholders agreement, and it kind of limits the responsibilities of the directors. Okay, so that there's still some control that the shareholders can have. All right. Now, the advantages of an incorporation. Okay, so basically, one of the advantages are it's limited, the shareholders have limited liability, which means the shareholder is only responsible for the amount that they put into the business in terms of shares. So for instance, Mickey, if you bought 100 shares in a company and you paid $10, right? Then you're only liable for $10. That means you can only lose $10, okay? If anything happened, your only liability is $10, okay? And as we said before, it is perpetual existence, meaning that it will continue to live on no matter what happens. If the shareholders die off or they withdraw, whatever, the company will still live on, right? Another one is tax advantages. You can get a lot of things, a lot of benefits under the tax law. Of course, your accountant will be able to help you on how you can navigate, you know, as an owner, how you can have the taxes, your taxes and all that stuff, okay? That's beneficial to you. And like we said, Mickey, estate planning, if you, with your shares will never die, right? You might die, but you will, of course, put in your will that your shares are transferred to your beneficiary, whether it be your children or whoever you want to leave them to. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any questions?
No.
No.
Okay.
Awesome.
Now, of course, with advantages, you have to have some disadvantages, right? And in the beginning, when you have to start up and get your incorporation ready and to be formed and all that, there's a cost. The cost is a lot more than the regular sole proprietor. You have to spend some money to get it started, and then of course having it maintained, because every year you have to have directors and shareholders meetings and coming together and making sure that everything is run smoothly. All right. And it is also cumbersome in structure. It's a little bit intricate. There's lots of different layers that you have to go step by step. But of course, don't feel too overwhelmed. And as you can tell, just trying to break it down now and explain it, there's so many different moving parts that you might feel a little bit like you don't understand, but just ask questions and don't worry, okay? Right. So any questions?
No.
No, okay. And as we said, we're going to look at the important players in a corporation. And we already spoke about the directors. They're the individuals responsible for managing or supervising the management of the business and affairs of a corporation for the benefit of the shareholders. So directors are there to make sure that they supervise the management. You don't see them in the office, working behind the desk or whatever, but they're behind the scenes making sure that they implement certain management styles and protocols that they will elect the officers to do, right? So the officers are the individuals who manage the corporation's day-to-day activities, and they're supervised by the directors. All right. And so an example of an officer position, it could be the president or the chief executive officer or the chief financial officer. So let's break it down again. You have the shareholders, right, who owns the company, the shares. They elect the directors. The directors are responsible for managing and supervising the management of the everyday business affairs. And then you have the officers who manage the actual day-to-day activities of the business. All right? Everybody's okay? Yeah?
So, Akira has a question. Again,
Okay.
can you just review again what is an entity for her?
Okay, so an entity is a thing, they say, with distinct and independent existence. So you have something, and we're going to use a business for an example of a thing, right? And it has its own distinct, right, existence. So for it, okay, let's use something like that she might understand. How about cupcakes? A cupcake company, right? It's called an entity because it has its own unique, it's a cupcake. It sells cupcakes. You go in, it's sugar, it smells great, it tastes good, right? So it's considered an entity because it has its own unique and distinct existence. It's something that is alive. It is in existence. You can see it. And that's what really another name for something that exists and has its own distinctness about it. Right? Kittynomics is an entity. Kittynomics is just another name for a business, but Kittynomics is an entity in its own right because it has its own, it existed. It's something that is very much into being It is a business that is operating every day, because every Friday you come on and you see that what Kittynomics is doing, it exists. So that's the entity. So it's another word for something that is distinct and has its own existence. So let's just say a business. It's just another name for a business, or could be a football club, or anything that has some a sort of it has its own procedures and protocols, and there's something that it's doing. It's an entity. It exists. I don't know how else to explain. You think she understands?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Can you put a yes or no in the chat box for me, please?
It's a little I know it can seem like a strange word, but if you think of it as anything, it's a thing that has its own existence and it has its own distinctness about it. It has its own unique thing. You could call a football club an entity. You could call, if you Kittynomics is an entity. Even a travel group might come together and form its own entity where they have certain rules and they go places. Anything that has its own thing going on where it's doing what it is meant to do is called an entity. So you interchange that word for whatever it is you're talking about, the business or a club, or right? Yeah.
I think they got it. They said it was a little confusing, but
I know it's because you know what it is too. It's a word that is interchangeable and can be used for so many things, right?
well,
As
Jenna says that she gets it. Gabby says, is entity like an identity?
no. So your identity is what makes you, like your name and who your mother is and where you're from and all that stuff. This entity it's not a person, it's a thing. It's a thing that exists. So like a business is not a person, but yeah, the business have an identity because, for instance, Kittynomics has an identity because of the name of it. You can identify Kittynomics by the name, but also Kittynomics is an entity because it is a business that does certain things. Its whole mission and vision is to do financial literacy for kids. So if you think an entity is like a thing, right? It's more of a thing that has its own reason for being, right? It has its own distinctness going on, and that is what makes it an entity. All right.
Yes. Let's go on. Sorry, kids.
Okay.
So if you still don't understand entity, we can get the description in like the dictionary, or ask your parents, because we have to move on. It's almost 6 o'clock. Okay.
Oh wow, it's almost 6 o'clock. So sorry. So anyway, so in a corporation might have something called a floating board of directors, so which means that in the articles it will specify a minimum and a maximum of directors. So for instance, you might say the minimum is 1 director that they can have and the maximum is 10, meaning you can't go more than 10. Okay, when you elect your directors, because your articles specify a floating board, which is a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 10, right? Or you can say a fixed board, meaning you can only have 5 directors, no less or no more. Okay. Now the qualifications to becoming a director: you cannot be less than 18. you have not been found to be of unsound mind by a court in Canada or elsewhere, you do not have the status of bankrupt, and you ordinarily reside in Canada. Okay?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, every director and officer of a corporation, when they're carrying out their responsibilities, must always act with honesty. So they have to be truthful in all their dealings. They have to be, they also have to make sure that what they're doing is legal, following the regulations, the articles or agreement of the corporation. They have to act in good faith. So they have to be impartial and not think about their own personal feelings or personal interest. All right. Now, when you act in the, they also have to always act in the best interest of the corporation at all times. And that means when they do that, they are acting in the best interest of the shareholders. Okay. Now, the shareholders' rights, like we said, they elect the directors to manage their affairs. They will receive financial information at regular intervals. They will have a meeting, a general meeting, and then they'll go over the financials of the corporation, and they'll also review the performance of the directors. Because remember, they elect the directors, so the directors are always on the review to make sure that they're doing what they were, brought on to do. Okay. Now this is where we talk about shares and ownership. So when you're issued shares, the issuance of shares to shareholders is one of the most important procedures when you operate in a corporation, because the shareholders are the owners of a corporation. Now, owning shares does not provide the holder with ownership in the assets of the corporation, because it is the corporation itself that is the legal owner of its property and assets. Instead, owning shares provides the shareholder with certain rights, including the right to elect directors and the right to receive dividends. So when you're a shareholder, when you buy shares in a company, one of the rights you have is to elect directors. And remember, we're only talking about our small private company, not the big public companies. And also you will receive dividends, and dividends are usually given at the end of the year after the shareholders share in the profit of the corporation. So when the corporation makes a profit, depending on what is in place for you as a shareholder, you will get a part of the profit, and these are called dividends. Okay. Now, when a corporation is formed, the articles that we talk about will set out the number and the class of shares that the corporation is authorized to issue. So there can be a fixed number or an unlimited number of shares authorized, right? So a corporation may have one or more classes of shares, and there are usually three main types of shares for non-offering corporations. Everybody, I'm sure, have heard of common shares, right?
Probably not. They
Probably not. So common shares is usually the first type of shares that any company offers. Usually that if you're only offering one type of share, one type of class of share, it's usually common. So common shares entitles the owner to participate fully in the corporation and to receive dividends upon the remaining distribution of property of the corporation. Okay. Special shares are not common shares and have specific rights, privileges, restrictions, and conditions, often based on tax consideration that do not apply to common shares. And then you have the preferred shares or preference shares that have priority over other classes of shares in respect of the payment of dividends or the distribution of assets on wind up or dissolution. So preference shares usually have priority over all the class of shares when it comes to getting paid the dividends or the distribution of the assets if the company is going to be dissolved. All right.
Yes. Miss Alistien, we have to wrap up really quick.
Okay.
So on our last two slides, can we, do you want to wrap up in like another 20 seconds if you can?
Okay, sure. So when we have to choose a name, of course, when we identify our business, and when we choose the name, we have a couple of elements. You have the distinctive element, which is a unique word to identify the business, usually created by the person. So it's usually a coined word. It's a word that has been created and it's not related to any other word. And that is like, I'm just going to say like Kittynomics. And then another part of the name is a descriptive element that describes the what the corporation does, like sales or manufacturing. And then the legal element, in Ontario, you have to have one of these legal elements at the end, either limited, incorporated, corporation, or LTD, Inc., or Corp. And so an example of a name would be like Key Visions Consulting Inc. You know, that's a consulting company, or Titan Aesthetics Limited, which you know is like skincare. Titan is the distinctive and aesthetics is the descriptive. And you don't have to have a word name. You can just have a number name. And in that case, that will just be generated by the actual government. And so your number name would also be the number that you have as your company assigned name. Sorry, guys, but I know we're going over time. In order for you to get a name, say you have a name in your head, you also have to get a nuance, which is a search to make sure that the name you have is not similar or that there's no one out there with that name. So you have to pay a fee and you get a report that says it's good to go. The name that you've chosen is fine. And then in order for you to incorporate your word name, then you will be able to incorporate your company. So I'm sorry to have to rush through this, but remember, when you're ready and you want to incorporate your company and do an incorporation, do not be afraid. There's a lot of wonderful, knowledgeable people who will be able to help you every step of the way. So dream big and go for it, okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I have to rush through.
Thank you, Miss Alistien. That was so
Thank you. I'm so sorry. It's a lot to
rush to the end, but that's okay. I'm sure the kids got the majority of the information. So I'm going to wrap up really quickly because we got to get through some of our ending stuff. So if you could stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
I will wrap up really quickly.
My eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad that I have my glasses.
All right. Okay. All right. So final question is, what would happen if kids became more financially literate? And our answer is real change that impacts the world. We ask this question on every Kittynomics webinar. We give you the same answer because we truly believe that when you guys become more financially literate, you guys are going to do some real changes that's truly going to impact the world, because whatever it is that you do is going to be absolutely phenomenal, and financial literacy is going to help you to get there, right?
Right.
Okay, we always call you guys our young financial literacy ambassadors. What is an ambassador? An ambassador is an authorized messenger or representative. So you guys are all authorized out there. You guys are our messengers. And I want you guys to share all the things that you learn about financial literacy to your friends, your family, your community. You already do that because I get the messages from your parents and they message me all the time to tell me, all the things that you have learned, which is absolutely phenomenal, and that you're telling your friends and your cousins and your brothers and your sisters out there. So thank you so much for being our ambassadors out there and sharing what you learn on Kittynomics. All right. So this was our schedule, but I'm going to skip it because I want to get to next week. And then I'll give you the following week. So next week is really, really special. Next week, we have Miss Marcy Ian on Kittynomics. So this one is going to be phenomenal. Every Kittynomics webinar is phenomenal. But this one we have with Miss Marcy Ian is going to be absolutely phenomenal. That's going to be next week, Friday, May 21st. And we're going to be talking about the power of pivoting. And so I've been asking you guys for weeks and weeks and weeks about sending me questions that you may want to ask Miss Marcy Ian. You can send me questions at kittynomics101@gmail.com or write your questions in the chat box now so that we can ask her next week. So listen, I want you guys to help me. I want you guys to make sure that you spread the word that Marcy's going to be on Kittynomics next week so that we can have a packed house. I want to try and get to a full room next week for Miss Marcy Ian. So I want you guys to share Kittynomics, get your friends and your family to join, because I want us to be able to show Miss Marcy Ian the amount of support and love that we can show her as you kids ask her all these phenomenal questions for next week, because this is a great opportunity to ask somebody that you may not be able to ask or have access to ask in the future, right? So this is a good one. She is now our MP for Toronto riding for the Liberal Party, but she's been a host, she's been a news anchor. Her story is absolutely phenomenal. I cannot wait to hear more about it. And I can't wait for her to share the Kittynomics community with Marcy, because I know you kids are going to ask some phenomenal questions, okay? All right, so that is it for this week. I always want to hear from you. If you have any questions or concerns, or better yet, give me some ideas as to what you guys would like to learn about every week, because we're here every Friday. So if you have a topic that you want to learn about, please send me an email, always with your parents' permission, please and thank you. Never send me anything without your parents' permission. And also, you can always like and follow us on
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. My time to post a TikTok video is running out. I'm going to get to it though. I picked a dance. Hey, I picked a dance.
I can't wait.
I know. Mickey says I picked like the hardest dance, but you'll see. This is going to be good. This will be good. All right. So that's it for this week. Let me just double check. Thank you, Miss Alistien, for all of your information.
Oh, thanks.
Sharing your knowledge with the Kittynomics community. We thank you and we appreciate you. And thank you to all of the kids that joined this week, and we'll see everybody next week. And the kids say thank you for the lesson. All right, so we'll see you guys next week. Remember, share Kittynomics so that we can show Miss Marcy Ian some love. And we'll see you next week. So, bye.
Bye. Thank you.